Existen diferentes tipos de hermenéuticas. Hay hermenéuticas o interpretaciones de liberación en la Biblia. Hay interpretaciones desde el punto de vista de la raza negra. En este caso vamos a hablar sobre hermenéutica ecológica o eco-hermenéutica. Así que vamos a tener el privilegio de hablar con Timothy Robinson, quien es director de doctorado en Brite Divinity School.
Teotecnología.com presenta Theobites.
Busque su taza de café, de té o de chocolate y siéntese a la mesa con nosotros porque este tema será de gran bendición a su vida y a la vida de su iglesia. Saludos y bendiciones, les habla Jesús Rodríguez Cortés y les doy la bienvenida a esta edición de Theobites. En esta edición iremos directamente a hablar con Timothy en inglés y queremos aprovechar el tiempo que tenemos con Timothy, que es alrededor de algunos 20 minutos, 25 minutos. El doctor Robinson es el director de programas de doctorado en Brite Divinity School y una de sus especialidades es la parte de ecoespiritualidad, ecoteología, ecohermenéutica, y en las notas de este episodio tendremos más información sobre el doctor Robinson. Sin más preámbulo, le damos la bienvenida al doctor Robinson.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. I know you have been busy having a lot of activities in Puerto Rico with the Evangelical Seminary of Puerto Rico. Also, you have been visiting some churches and some places. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've only been here at the Seminario participating in the new certificate in eco-theology, this initiative that some of the faculty and students have here at the seminary that they're beginning, and I've come to give a workshop, and last night I gave a lecture on worship and ecology to a group that included several of the faculty here at the Seminario. This is my first time in Puerto Rico, and it's been a very rich experience. I've experienced wonderful hospitality from the personnel here at the seminary, and I even got to visit El Yunque National Forest yesterday for a while and actually experience some of the beauty of the island's ecology. So that was a special treat.
Great. I'm glad you went to El Yunque. You know, some people visit the island and sometimes they prefer to go to the beach instead of go to the rainforest.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I grew up in eastern Tennessee in the mountains, and I love mountains. So if I have the choice between the mountains and the beach, if I have to choose, I'm always going to choose the mountains.
Great, great. Let's talk about the topic we have here. We are going to talk about eco-hermeneutics, eco-interpretation. So I would like to define that. Now, how can you define eco-hermeneutics?
Mm-hmm. Perhaps the simplest definition comes from the titles of a series of books on eco-hermeneutics called the Earth Bible Project, and the subtitle of most of those books is Reading the Bible from the Perspective of the Earth. So eco-hermeneutics is a way of interpreting Scripture that has arisen in response to movements in eco-theology over the last 20 years or so. Of course, we always read Scripture. We always interpret Scripture from some perspective. We all bring our some kind of assumptions about what we're going to find. We always read from some context when we interpret Scripture, and those contexts and those assumptions and those perspectives shape our interpretations. So, for instance, a number of years ago, feminist biblical scholars began applying feminist principles and perspectives to Scripture, attempting to find the voices of women in Scripture, uncovering the ways in which Scripture had been interpreted patriarchally to diminish the experience of women and to establish male superiority, to find and retrieve the narratives of women that were in Scripture, and to contribute through their engagement with the Bible to greater justice greater gender justice, justice between men and women, and the full flourishing of women in religious life. In a similar way, ecological hermeneutics has emerged out of a vast scholarship of eco-theology that has itself emerged over the last 50 years or so. And eco-hermeneutics brings to the reading and interpretation of the Bible a concern for engaging and interpreting Scripture in ways that contribute to more just relations between humans and earth, uncovering the ways in which our interpretations have supported or promoted even some of our destructive habits, ecologically speaking, and to find places where in Scripture that might inform a more whole and more just ecological spirituality.
Justice. You talk about that during the conference today. You said it is related to justice. Mm-hmm. Talking about ecology is about talking about justice.
Yes.
Can you tell us which are the principles of eco-hermeneutics?
Sure. In the Earth Bible Project and since in other publications, the scholars who developed it, and Norman Hobble, who is an Australian Hebrew Bible scholar, has been one of the real leaders in the eco-hermeneutics movement. There are others, of course, but his is probably the most recognizable name in biblical scholarship who has been promoting eco-hermeneutics. And so Hobble and others established 6 core principles that guide an eco-hermeneutic of Scripture. And they are the principle of intrinsic worth, by which they mean the recognition that the universe and the earth and all its components have intrinsic worth and value. This is in direct response to some earlier assumptions about Scripture and ecology that said, well, the earth doesn't really have much of a place in the Bible, that the natural world is not very important in the narratives of Scripture, that it doesn't really have a place in salvation history, that the Bible is only concerned with human salvation and well-being, that nature is just the stage or the backdrop on which this is played out. So to recognize that the earth, that nature does have worth and value is a fundamental starting point for the eco-hermeneutic endeavor. So when we read Scripture, when we interpret any particular passage with this principle in mind, we ask questions like, does the text or its interpretation devalue earth or parts of creation? If so, how and why? And are there ways to read a particular text that recognize the earth's intrinsic value? A second principle is the principle of interconnectedness. That is, that the earth is a community of interconnected living things which are mutually dependent on each other for life and survival. This, of course, is a fundamental ecological principle. This is what our sciences have been telling us for the last half century, that we humans, for one, are very dependent upon our environment. We're not independent of it. No matter how much we may want to believe that we are, that the earth and all of its interconnected biosystems themselves are made up of organisms and beings and processes that depend upon each other in a symbiotic relationship. And it's certainly true, as I said, that we humans are a part of that web. And so the principle of interconnectedness would ask us to read Scripture in ways that recognize and affirm that. For instance, if we read the first chapter of Genesis in the creation accounts, we see there a very detailed and lovely description that's very specific in some ways about the creation of the fauna and the flora and particular kinds of beasts and even the astronomical dimensions of the cosmos itself, as well as the human. And in the second chapter of Genesis, we see that the human is in fact created right out of the topsoil, is what the language in the Hebrew suggests, just like all of the other creatures, so that we share a fundamental, elemental kind of a connection to all that is, because we're all made of the same stuff.
I like that, topsoil instead of dust, which is one word that is used very often to talk about the creation.
Right.
Topsoil. I like that.
Well, the Hebrew language that is used in that text is the word for what is termed dust is actually a term that refers to the common topsoil in Hebrew, that which things are grown out of, and even the term Adam or Adam is a pun on the name Adam and the word for the soil, Adamah. So yes, we are made not only of dust but of dirt. Yeah. Another principle is the principle of voice. That is, that the earth is a living entity that's capable of voicing its cries against injustice. I was really hoping today that someone would bring up the story of Balaam's donkey as we discussed the Eco-Hermeneutics, and sure enough, they did. That's one example of a place where the creatures themselves. So if you recall, Balaam is going along, he's on the wrong path, he's headed for doom. His donkey is up in front of him, and an angel of the Lord appears in the roadside to block his way, and the donkey goes off the path, and this makes Balaam very angry because he can't see the angel, and he beats his donkey, and he chastises it. And finally, it's the donkey that turns to Balaam and says, "Why are you beating me? Haven't I always been a faithful donkey to you? I'm just telling you, this is what God is trying to say to you." So it's only the donkey is the only character in the narrative that perceives God's message and then mediates it, relates it to Balaam, and in fact stands up for himself and calls out and chastises Balaam for his abuse, his injustice toward this creature. So that is just a really obvious text to go to when we're talking about the ways in which the earth is capable of its own voice and resisting. A fourth principle is the principle of purpose. The universe, the earth, all its components are a part of a dynamic cosmic design, and each piece has a place in the overall goal of that design. Again, the creation stories in the early chapters of Genesis, as well as many passages in the wisdom literature, speak to this, that the creation has been ordered by God very carefully, that all its parts have some role to play, and that they're all important. And the fifth principle is the principle of custodianship. That principle says that the earth is a balanced and diverse domain, and that it requires responsible custodians who function as partners with, rather than rulers over, the earth to sustain and balance its diversity. Back to Genesis again. It's in the second chapter of Genesis in the creation of the human. As I mentioned earlier, the human is made out of the same stuff as the other creatures. And the charge is given in Genesis 2 to serve the land. The translation has often been to till and to keep, but the term that's used there, that's often translated in that way, actually means serve or to servant in other parts of the Hebrew Bible. It's often used for master-slave relationships or for priestly service before God in the temple. I just had one of the participants today inform me that it also can mean to nurture as a mother. So that suggests a really different kind of relationship to the earth than to plow it, to till it and to keep it. We think that that's a mandate for agriculture, and agriculture is not wrong in any sense. That's how we, sustain ourselves with food. But it does suggest a different kind of relationship with the earth than the domineering, hierarchical relationship that's often.
Which is the way that most of the people see the whole thing. They control the earth. It is not like that. The word is nurture.
Right. In fact, historically, people have paid more attention to Genesis 1:28, where it says to have dominion over the earth as our guiding principle, than to the Genesis 2, where it says to serve the earth. So yes, that's part of the ecological hermeneutic, is to bring some suspicious eyes to Genesis 1:28, that it may be interpreted in some other way than promoting a domineering, hierarchical, damaging relationship. But there are other voices that speak in Scripture as well to a different kind of relationship. And finally, there's the principle of resistance, that the earth and its components not only suffer from human injustices, but actively resist them in the struggle for justice. Job is a great example of this, where after Job's complaint before God, the voice speaks out of the whirlwind and reminds Job that he's not in charge. He wasn't there at the foundations of the world. He didn't create all this. And so it's sort of a way to relativize the human-centeredness that we've all often assumed, and apparently that Job assumed. But it's out of the whirlwind, right? As one of our participants today pointed out, when I asked for brainstorming about all the places in the Bible that they could think of where nature plays a role, some aspect of nature plays a role. Someone mentioned in looking at the creation accounts right at the beginning of Genesis, where God, the Spirit hovered over the watery chaos, and it's out of this that creation happens. Is the watery chaos and the winds themselves that participate? They're God's partners in creation. It's the elements themselves, the earth itself, the cosmos itself, that participates in its own becoming along with God. So there's a sense of seeing agency that the natural elements have. They're not simply inert matter upon which we act for them to have some value, but that they have a value of their own, and that they're beyond our control in many ways. And so they call us to be in a different kind of relationship than we have been for much of modernity with them.
What can we do with these principles in preaching, Sunday Biblical School, and other activities in our churches?
Well, we can start with preaching, right? Eco-Hermeneutics especially lends itself to the interpretation of Scripture that's done from the pulpit and in classrooms. So last night I spoke with the faculty about ecology and liturgy, and revising our liturgies in ways that might help us to imagine our way into this kind of changed relationship with the earth, because it's in our worship and our preaching that a great deal of our theology is formed. But not only our conscious or cognitive theology, our belief systems, but also worship and preaching operate at a gut level, at an emotional level, and over time they begin to form us affectively, subconsciously, and if our preaching and our worship present images of a spirituality that hovers above the earth, that is accomplished in some otherworldly realm, where the spirit is superior to the material, or that God is somehow removed from the world, that is so transcendent that God can't be found or experienced in the natural world, that salvation is something that is for humans alone, and that only humans are important in this grand scheme of salvation. If that's the kind of worldview that our worship and our preaching promotes, then we're not going to get much of anywhere, right? And we see it, and I saw it when I was a pastor, even in more progressive congregations that would take on, weren't afraid to talk about the ways in which Christian faith demands doing justice to our neighbors, but they often didn't see that as including creation itself, the earth itself, because it's never been part of our preaching and our worship and even our teaching in Sunday school. And so that's partly why this initiative in Eco-Hermeneutics began, was to give preachers and teachers, not only scholars, but people who interpret Scripture and who employ it in spiritual formation and in worship and preaching, to give them resources and suggestions and tools to begin to reinterpret it. So I think that's where it begins, is in our public life together, the places where we are forming people's consciousness and worldview and how that shapes their spiritual lives. There are a number of other, practical, down-to-earth things that we can do. Our buildings, for instance, are ecological, sites of ecological either health or sin, right? The kinds of energy, electricity we use, and how much of it.
The architecture.
The ways that we consume, right? Do we recycle? The kinds of cleaning products that we use, are they toxic to the environment? Where does our coffee for coffee hour come from? How's it grown? Is it grown organically? Is it fairly traded? There are so many ways that a building can either speak about a well-formed or a malformed relationship with the earth. I think that developing curriculum for children and youth that not only begins to teach them, includes references to the earth in the kinds of teaching we do about what faith is, as we teach them Christian faith, but to immerse them, to find experiences that get them into the world in some way or other, either just to be in contact with it. And, I grew up with going to camps, camping ministries, and that was a really important resource for me, even though nothing conscious. None of the adults who were running the camps I went to were eco-theologians, right? They didn't. They actually, I think, bought into the negative narrative that I'm trying to undo. About salvation and God's relationship to the earth and our importance in it. But we were in these beautiful wilderness kinds of settings, and they would take us hiking over the Appalachian Mountains and rafting down rivers. And we almost drowned in a cave once. I remember spelunking. That was an experience of nature's terror, right? And we were in awe, and it fostered respect for the earth. But to be immersed in these wonderful, often wilderness settings, and to have that kind of contact with the natural world began to form something that was deeper than what we were getting cognitively, but also to take children and youth into places where they're doing hands-on things to assist. One of the congregations that I served began a green ministry, and so we had a very robust group that worked and did a number of things. So we did a lot of study, and we have book discussions about nature writing, and we took I led a paddle trip once so that we could see the river and get to know it and begin to learn about our watershed. But we also did things like monitor the stream that ran through the back of our property. And, we had water testing kits, and we would report to the proper agencies when things were askew, and we would check the health of the stream and clean it up. So, that's for adults also, but especially with children and youth, who are often the ones who we take into mission projects, to take them into mission projects that involve the earth, so that they begin to know that mission is not only in human communities, but it's also with the earth community as well.
Time's up, but I would like to know if there's something I haven't asked and you would like to talk about that.
There is so much to say on this topic that I don't think I can choose a single.
I know, but sometimes you want to talk about something that you haven't been asked, and this is the opportunity.
Well, I would just say one word about something you already raised, but we didn't really go into, and that's the connection between social justice and ecological justice. As I shared with the group today, I offer an elective course in eco-justice and spirituality at my seminary, and sometimes students will say that they don't enroll in that because they don't see its relevance. That they're very concerned about all sorts of social justice concerns that are related to race or class and poverty or sexuality and gender. And so they'll often say things like, why should we waste our time, talking about nature when there's so many pressing concerns in the world? But as we spent some time talking today in the seminar, social and ecological justice are intimately connected, that the use and abuse of the earth's resources affects not only the creatures and the ecosystems themselves, it affects the human inhabitants in which they live. So, for example, climate change is not only a matter of a changing biosphere that many of us in the developed world, while it may not be pleasant in some ways, we will adapt to it because we have resources and we have technology to do so. And we're not very motivated to change too much unless we have to. But for folks in the developing world, for instance, in islands in the South Pacific, island nations that will disappear as the sea levels rise, millions and millions of people who live along coastal areas, especially in places, say, in Southeast Asia and Africa and other places, where already their arable land is salinized and is no longer useful for agriculture. Sea level rising is displacing many people. In the coming decades, the estimates of what will be known as climate refugees, the estimates are in the millions and millions. So the people in those places that are most affected are the ones who have done the least to contribute to this situation. And so that raises fundamental questions for Western Christians. We in the West who have contributed more than our fair share to the climate change and other ecological ills. So it calls for us, we Christians in the West, to ask some really hard questions about our own responsibilities to our neighbors in need, neighbors to whom we have done harm, whether indirectly or directly. And that falls under the fundamental category of justice. This is a long Christian tradition, right, from the Bible through contemporary thinkers on contemporary Christian ethicists who talk about justice that is social, that is ask, how do we be in right relationship to our neighbor? What is our obligation to our neighbor? In this instance, when we talk about ecological justice, we're asking what does the right relationship with the earth and its creatures look like? It's other than human creatures. What are our obligations to the earth and its other than human creatures? But that also includes asking these questions about our obligations to our human neighbors as well, who are affected by the ecosystems that are now degraded.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. I enjoy it every single minute.
Well, I did too. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Si usted desea encontrar las notas de este episodio, le invito a visitar nuestra página en la internet para este podcast, que es www.theobites.com. www.theobites.com. También le invito a compartir este episodio con otras personas que usted sabe le será de gran bendición. Hasta aquí esta edición de Theobites. Gracias por darnos el privilegio de llegar hasta ustedes a través de las redes informáticas. Será hasta el próximo episodio. Que la paz y la gracia de nuestro Señor Jesucristo sea con ustedes.